Yo, welcome back. So it's kind of time to talk about league starters. And for this specific league, it's a little bit different than it has been so far for me because usually it's clear as day to me which is going to be like the top tier league starters. Whereas this go around, it's a little bit more um, obscured because there is so many opportunities at the moment. This is truly a builders league in my opinion. Although the new Bloodlines is very, very, very heavily centered around minions, there is still plenty of builds out there that doesn't necessarily utilize a bloodline, but can still provide a massive amount of damage in the early game. And to be fair, there is normally I put up 3 and then I have like a bonus or something like that, right? But this time around, it's a little bit less obvious what is actually gonna be like a number 1. So for that reason, I'm not gonna put a number on them or anything. I'm gonna kind of talk about a couple of builds that I'm personally thinking about league starting, and then from there, we'll basically yeah, we'll take it from there, right? So first and foremost, if the skills are the way that I think they are when it comes to some of the newer skills, in specifically the kinetic skills, right? Like, so we have the kinetic rain and the kinetic wall. Both of those looks very, very interesting. They look very powerful, but it's very hard to tell if they are as powerful as they look before you actually get to play around with it, right? Now, in case it is as good as I think they are, I would put that at the top of the board. So any type of kinetic blast starter type deal, and you can basically do that on multiple different archetypes. Like, you could do a jug, you could do a ranger, you could do like there's multiple different ones you could go for here. But in general, speaking, with the changes to wands and whatnot, I think that kinetic blast, rather that be like one of the new ones or maybe even one of the old ones. It could be kinetic blast of clustering, it could be a fragmentation, it could be the just standard one. I do think they have very decent stats, and there's a good chance that they'll be at the top in terms of best starters. But in case those aren't as good as I'm imagining, then I picked a couple others. But before we look at those, I kind of want to talk about something different real quick, which is minions. Since all of these bloodlines are heavily centered around the minions, right? Like, they are not all of them, but like fucking 80% of them. Um, there might be some minion builds this league that are just outrageously good. To be fair, in PoE1, I'm not necessarily super familiar with the tree yet. Like, I'm not so familiar with the tree that I would put out my own build guides for this. Mostly, as I've done before, I go look through a bunch of different creators, see all the, you could say, benefits and negatives with the different builds, and then from there I'll like kind of like make a list. I'll pick out the ones that I felt like was the best, and usually I'll test one of them real quick and see if I like it. Now, with minions, it's a little bit different, right? Because I am not entirely, I don't know all the minions in the game. I don't know a lot of things about the minion archetype in PoE1, whereas in PoE2 I literally started with that, right? Like, so I got that early on, and I have learned the tree, so it's a lot easier for me to make an actual build myself. Whereas in PoE1 I'm still learning, right? And I think that Ghazzy is probably going to put out some type of minion build that is absolutely disgusting. So I'll keep an eye out for that. But I'll leave a link in the description for his channel. So in case you guys want to play some minion stuff, that's where I would go to find the information for a minion build, right? Now, for the picks that I'm personally thinking about is gonna look like this. So I'm thinking about starting either a Chieftain RF, an Elementalist RF, or a Deadeye, like a Lightning Arrow Deadeye, right? Now, the reasoning behind me picking these three is because it's a very reliable way to get to maps and get through maps, in my opinion, right? Like, so there is a lot of benefits to having these builds early on, but they do tend to fall off a little bit once you get later into the game and you want to do some bosses and stuff like that, right? So they do tend to kind of fall off. Now, the reasoning behind picking these is because they have potential to get swapped into something different that's even better, right? So, in no order or anything, this is just what I'm planning right now. And the reasoning is I can turn these builds into something different. So for the RF Chieftain, we can turn that into Molten Strike of the Zenith Jog, for instance, which is, in my opinion, probably one of the strongest builds in the game. I think it might even be the strongest. I'm not entirely sure, but this build is so phenomenally strong. And if you want to check out this build, Connor is his name. Connor has a extremely well put together video where he goes over everything that has to do with the build, how to make it, how to craft the gear, everything, right? So I'm gonna leave a link for that video in the description. And for the RF Chieftain, you know Pohx is like the king for that one. So I've already played this and I already used Pohx's build guide, and it is so well written, and everything, like everything within the build guide is literally explained to the T. There is like really nothing missing, right? So no matter which kind of question you have, Pohx has the answer, whether that be in the actual build guide itself or if it's on his webpage. There is just, of course, I'm going to leave a link for that in the video as well. But I really like the fact that there's everything as a new player you would want in terms of information. So starting out with RF Chieftain and then swapping into the Molten Strike of the Zenith Jog later, I feel like that's a really, really strong starter. This one will go all the way through maps, right? And then once you get to like end game and you have some currency, you can then swap into the Molten Strike of the Zenith, which will literally kill everything in the game. This build will murder any of the bosses exceptionally fast, right? And for that reason, this is probably what I'm starting. I'm not 100% yet, but I think this will be what I'm starting. And the other one was the Elementalist. So for the Elementalist, sorry, one second. For the Elementalists, Captain Lance put out a guide for Elementalist RF, and it looked very interesting. It looked very, very good. Even with the nerf to golems, I still think this will be extremely good. Now, the beautiful thing about this is you can swap this into an Occultist later down the line for the Forbidden Rite of Soul Sacrifice, which is what I played this Mercenaries League. And that build in itself is extremely strong. It's actually so good so that I would consider it the second best build I've ever played in the game so far. Just because of how tanky, how much damage. It has everything you want. The only thing it really doesn't have is massive like speed. It's not the fastest build, but the power and the survivability on it is absolutely outrageous. Now, it did receive a tiny nerf to the Whisper's Amulet, that previously it would be able to roll between 200 and 400 flat ES. It will only be able to roll between 50 and 100 now. And on my current Forbidden Rite build, if I take off the Whispers, I'm still sitting at roughly 15k ES. And I played that build once when I had 10k ES. And I could still, at 10k ES, do T16.5s with double risk scarabs, fully juiced, and with not really with any problems. And then once I got basically to 14k, I could do that same strategy, but in tier 17s with no real problems. So for that reason, I feel like this is a very safe way to go. Pretty much equal, these two, I would say. Now, the Jog here is probably stronger in the end, but it's also vastly more expensive to get to like true end game gear on this in comparison to the Forbidden Rite, because the Forbidden Rite utilizes a lot of gear which is extremely cheap. And the things that aren't necessarily the cheapest, you can easily craft yourself. There's only really a couple of things on this build that would have high value. One probably being the Whispers, because we don't know the drop rate and we don't know how easy it's going to be to get that. But technically, if the drop rate has been cut down to like 10% of what it used to be, then of course, since they are way harder to do now, that's probably going to rise in price by a lot. But in case it hasn't been cut down on the drop rate and it's still going to drop fairly often, then the price probably won't be that high. And besides that, you have a couple of other things for the build that's kind of pricey. One being the Impossible Escape, it's called, and the other one being the Hooper's jewel from the Legion encounters. I forget the exact name of it. But yeah, those two can be slightly expensive, and of course the amulet could be slightly expensive. But besides those things, I would say everything else on the build is stupid cheap, right? Like you're not paying a lot. So basically, I made this build for around 70-80 divines last league. Now do mind that I made the build before Lance put out the video, so I got all the gear really cheap, and then once he put out the build, that same gear kind of doubled in price, right? Because it got super popular. So for that reason, it's up in the air at the moment how expensive it will be, but the quality is there, right? Like you are getting something for your investment. Now for the Deadeye, Lightning Arrow is just it's my first ever build in PoE 1. It's one of those builds that are just extremely good at mapping. I would consider this probably one of the best mappers that I have played so far. Clear speed is outrageous. The amount of AoE is outrageous. It's just overall, it's such a good build. And the fact that we can swap it later down the line into Kinetic Blast, for instance, or something like that, it just makes it even better, right? Because there is potential that the Kinetic Blast wall thing will be extremely high single target damage, and then if you have like something like the Kinetic Rain and it's really good, then you can maybe swap between those two in terms of what you're doing. If you're doing maps, you have the AoE, and if you're doing bosses, you put the wall on, so that way you can like kind of swap back and forth. But yeah, depending on how good the kinetic skills are, this could be a really, really good choice. But the problem being is I think a lot of people will go this direction with kinetic skills this league, so the gear for any type of Kinetic Blast build will probably skyrocket it, and it will be super, super expensive. That is just what I think will happen. But as I said, that's probably why I'm going with one of the two first here, because RF Chiftain is super cheap to make. This will cost you basically nothing to get to maps. This will be super expensive. You can anywhere from 50 divine to 500 divine, I would call a minimum investment. And then beyond 500 divine is where you're going to start seeing like the big boy, real juicy maps, everything. You can just murder it all real easy. And for the RF Elementalist, that is seemed like really cheap gear as well. And the Occultist, as of the Mercenary League, wasn't super expensive if we compare it to the other two. I have a feeling this is going to be the cheaper outcome. So yeah, that is my current situation when it comes to League starters. This is what I'm thinking of playing, and this is the reasoning behind why I want to play those. And if you are interested, let me just show you this is the Occultist. So as you'll see right here, we are at 16,800 energy shield, and if I take this off, we are at 14,000 300, which would be a little bit more, right? Because we would have basically anywhere between 50 and 100 flat ES on here. But everything else on this build, well, Relic Cache potentially can be a little bit expensive, but it's not really like super outrageous. I paid 4 div for these, right? Like, so that wasn't crazy, I would say. And the rest of it is just fairly simple gear to make. You get some dense fossils, and that's pretty much it. You kind of do want to get some, which seems a little weird because we are running on a energy shield build, but you do want to have some life regen because we convert the life regen into energy shield. So if you, that's kind of normally a failed mod, right? Like if you get life regen onto an energy shield base, but for this specific build, it's actually a benefit. So that's why you see me having it on all pieces of gear here. And like this build, for instance, usually this is super cheap. This one is extremely cheap. Creating a armor like this and a helmet like this and a pair of gloves like this, very easy. You use the fossils, you use the dense fossil with the one resonator here, and you just spam a chest piece or a helmet or a pair of gloves until you hit some decent ES mods. As you can see here, I hit T2, T2, T1. Once I hit that, going from here and forward was fairly easy. It wasn't super hard. And that's basically the same idea for all of them, right? Like it's not that hard. And as I said, the only real like possible super expensive parts could be the Elegant Hubris and the Impossible Escape. These two can at times be very expensive. Like, I can give you an example. I bought this for 1 divine, and then Lance put out the video, and when I price checked it after that, it was 150 divine, right? So it all comes down to how popular the build is and stuff like that, right? So it's just, be aware that that's potentially something that could be expensive. But that's only because I wanted to have like some really good stats on here. So the increased damage per power charge, for instance, and increased critical strike chance is all really valuable to this build. So that's the reasoning why I went that direction. And besides that, we have, of course, a Watcher's Eye. The only thing you want here is the block spell damage and with Discipline. And that mod is usually like a divine. If you just get one that's pretty random with that. And then, of course, another thing that can at times be a slight bit of like more expensive is the tattoos with energy shield, depending on how heavily in demand they are. And you are gonna wanna, as you can see, I filled out my entire tree with that. And you do want to do that because you don't need any type of attributes due to this Supreme Ostentation, which will ignore all attribute requirements. But on the other hand, you're not gaining any ES from your intelligence nodes here. So putting the ES tattoo on brings you a lot more energy shield. And this build is outrageous. It's so crazy with the damage. I absolutely adore this build. And I can highly recommend it. And I think this might be the best choice, starting with the RF Elementalist and then changing into this. Since I just played it, I'm more tempted to go another way because I literally just spent the whole league playing this and it's already level 100, right? Like, so I did play this quite a bit. But let me know what you guys are starting. I would love to hear if you guys have different ideas or if there's something that you see that I did not see. Leave a comment if you have something, a suggestion that I should check out that I haven't talked about or I might not have seen yet. So yeah, please let me know, and if nothing else, I'll see you all on lunch day when it all goes down. I hope you all have a great day, great evening, whatever it might be for you, and like, comment, subscribe, all the good jazz. I'll catch you all in the next one.